Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. My name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Our objective is to enthuse, inspire, energize, and empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes here in BW and beyond. We do so by inviting these entrepreneurs into our makeshift studio. Sometimes we call them to the restaurant, sometimes we go to our studio, and we ask them to share their experiential knowledge, their experiences and their expertise. And we ask them as many questions as we can, aimed at empowering you also as a viewer. Dumela, hello and welcome to another episode of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. As always, we try to bring you life-changing and impactful information. We say we strive to enthuse, to energize, and I think today you're going to really be empowered. My guest is no stranger to this podcast. He's been here 2 or 3 times, actually 3 times before. And my guest is Oabona Kgengwenyane. But I don't want to steal his thunder. I want him to introduce himself. For those who may not know Kgengwenyane, just share a short, condensed CV of yourself.
Okay. As has been said, my name is Oabona Kgengwenyane. I'm a father, a husband, largely an entrepreneur with a journey that has been on for now about 24 years, where I founded a company called InnoLead Consulting, which started as an expert group, which is one of the prime consulting firms in Botswana in management consulting. We also have other enterprises. One of them is called Digital High, which is a technology company mainly in the telco space. Another one is the farming enterprise called Manenzo Farming, where we do cattle and small stock breeding in the Sandveld and in the Banyana farms area.
Yes.
So those are the 3 core enterprises. But I have to say that we are currently very excited where we have developed a unit in InnoLead which is going to look at how we can expand globally and really leverage emerging technologies to expand 10x. So we have a division that looks at that, which is just dedicated to looking at how we can leverage futuristic technologies to place InnoLead more on the global scale and not just look at the Botswana environment. So in short, that's been my story for the last 24 years.
Some of the viewers might know you from your couple of appearances, but just sort of by way of catching up, any significant developments over the last, is it when you were last here, is about 18 months ago? Is there anything significant you can share with us?
Yeah, well, from an entrepreneurship, when you say that, because being a family man, the big development last year was that I became a grandfather for the first time since I was on this earth.
Congratulations. That's a big one.
Yeah, our first son had a daughter called Nakani, beautiful, and it really made us very happy.
Yeah.
On the business front, I think the development is really we have really now capitalized our digitization program, advisor and consulting side of InnoLead. As anybody would know that the world is going digital big time. A lot of organizations are going digital. So about 18 months ago, we beefed up that division with a gentleman called Mogobe, who's heading that division, bringing a lot of experience from the region as a manager for one consulting firm in South Africa. So we built quite good capacity around there. So if clients are looking for digital advisory, digital solutions, such as augmented reality, digital twinning, all those types of digitization programs we're able to assist. So that has been a very exciting development from the InnoLead front.
And of course, the last 4 months we've had a thing called AI. Are you active in that space?
No, absolutely. Part of
now
this.
we have Chat GPT just
Oh
came on
yes,
stream.
yes, yeah. No, terribly exciting in terms of what's happening. One of the things that I don't think we do enough is actually understand and monitor what's happening in the world with regard to some of these global emerging technologies that can 10x your business. And as you said, AI is one of those accelerators. And when I talked about our wing, which is looking at expanding, we're actually studying these technologies. Which is led by universities such as Singularity University in the States, where they specialize in looking at how the future develops in terms of technologies, whether it's computational power, whether it's AI, 3D printing, all those technologies. And I think you've hosted my son on this program before, Mateo.
Yes.
So
we are yet to upload that video.
Yeah. So Mateo is one example of a young man who's really leveraged technologies to expand his business globally, even based in the UK as a student, has been able to go low cost and be able to expand in a 10x way in terms of his businesses. So it's really exciting, and it's something that I'll really encourage our nation and entrepreneurs in general to really look at how we can leverage technology more for our economy.
All right. The subject we're going to cover, Bagaitsu, is Botswana's deteriorating social well-being. This is a subject that we had to reflect upon, you and I, in terms of what we see happening. You grab a newspaper. We know that things are bad. We know that newspapers tend to sensationalize, but this time around is different. Can you just help me introduce the subject and explain to the viewer why it's important?
Okay. I think first, with a disclaimer, that I'm not a social scientist. So I'm looking forward to actually a day where you'll host maybe myself and maybe two more who are actually specialists in the field, maybe a psychologist and a social, because I just believe that there is not enough discussion and debate on this very critical matter. But otherwise, in terms of the subject itself, it's again as a consultant and observer of society, and also doing a lot of corporate strategy for organizations, we found that there's a certain level of deterioration in terms of people's well-being, and sometimes you observe society through the eyes of newspapers, news media, radio, and so forth, and that in itself sort of captures the symptoms of what's happening. I mean, just today's paper and Mo Voice came up with a story about a young man who chopped a girlfriend's head, and we know it's not even the first time. And the stories that we get around town are really a major concern to me, especially that even at that extreme level, if you go to just normal performing employees at work or families, there are a lot of dynamics that are not good. But to start with the fact that as humans, I have to emphasize that we are anchored on trying to find a good life. This is going back to our story of happiness, which we've a subject that we've discussed before. That people are generally, if they are asked, there's been studies and what they call meta studies, studies of studies, that people have been asked, and repeatedly in the 95% to 100, globally people are saying, I just want to be happy. The issue is, what is happiness? And happiness is today is hugely measured. It's measured by different bodies around the world. We know that there is a global happiness report, which we'll talk because the results for 2023 just came out a few days ago. There is also a lot of prominent figures in the industry that do a lot of surveys, like we've talked about Martin Seligman with his PEMA model, that people generally want to be happy. And part of the ingredients of happiness is very intact social fabric of society. People want social support, people want to be generous, people want to be healthy in terms of life expectancy, people want beauty and health, and so forth. So these are elements that, from a Botswana perspective, I see that we done well in terms of economic performance, but in terms of economy and associate social well-being, I'll say psychosocial well-being, because here we'll be talking about things like mental health. We'll talk about drug abuse, alcoholism, imprisonment, all those type of things which will form part of our discussion. But the story is, Botswana is not doing well in these aspects, albeit having done very well in the past 30, 40 years when it comes to economic development. And I'll say more about how some research has shown that human beings on earth, maybe, especially in the developing countries, they have hit a stop when it comes to material wealth. Now we are stuck because socially it looks like we are failing. So social well-being is going down, but material wealth is going up. So this is where I believe in Botswana we've reached a bit of a crossroads. And I think although we've emphasized economic and material well-being, we need in parallel to look at how we are developing from a social well-being. Let me just add a little bit of positivity to that as well. I know when I came, I said,
I said, look, be positive.
Because if you look at people like I know you're slightly older than me, but people of our age group, we in our younger years, we are a generation that the essence of how we lived in our agrarian society, when in the village. And I can picture when I was a young man in the early 70s, how peaceful, family-oriented, generous, giving. I was telling someone yesterday how I recall how my grandfather was a big farmer in terms of cattle and grain crops. Every time he will slaughter a cow, and every time they slaughter a cow, I can recall how different pieces. I'll see people going in different directions, different neighbors, part of the cow. That sharing, it's now doesn't happen like the way it used to happen. So in my view, Botswana had a time when we were actually the social well-being, despite being poor and not materially up, where we were actually happier. From my recollection,
when our GDP was down.
It was down. But we had a happy life. We were happy. We had milk and porridge and pap, and life was good. And half the time it's because we didn't know any better. So it's important to qualify that because we didn't know any better. And I'll talk about the insidious nature of inequality that is when you start learning about what you can have, then stresses and anxiety starts building in. So there was a picture then when we were doing very well in terms of well-being. Obviously, at the time, you can argue that health, hygiene, those things were not there, but generally, there was a good social fabric. But now, Ubuntu were there, whatever, Ubuntu, and people were living in a very family, social, intact way. That has now really deteriorated, and seeing some of the ills that we'll talk more about it as we go along with the discussion.
Still on the introduction of the subject, before we really go into the nub of it, I seem to recall as a practicing lawyer that in the zeros there was a phenomenon known as passion killing, which was very, very rampant. And then I know that government introduced a law called the Domestic Violence Act, where a woman could go to a magistrate or to the police and get an order to evict the husband who was abusing him, and vice versa. And for a bit, there was a bit of quiet, if you like, in the teens, from 2010 to about. But all of a sudden, the last 3 years, there seems to be an explosion of these violent acts, which seem to go back to the time of those passion killings before the introduction of the Domestic Violence Act, which has helped dampen some of these things. What is your take on that, just in terms of understanding why there's been ebb and flow?
I'll argue that I don't think there has been any drop. I think the fact that we go for what you call, just patchwork in terms of going for really sustainable long-term type solutions. In other words, those symptoms, as an example, higher passion killings, and also many others in terms of, for instance, earlier this week, I read that last year there were 4,000 cases of child abuse, sexual abuse in Botswana. Botswana is one of the most highly rated countries in terms of rape cases in the world.
Oh, no.
So I can go on and on and on, Mogobe. We are a country where, from a social well-being point of view, I think we are almost on a free fall. And my call and wanting to come here and talk about this subject is because we need to do something. And I mean, if we give examples of more of these, just the happiness report that came out earlier in the week, we are now 132 out of 137.
Is that
you
a
recall?
deterioration?
No. We're still in the top 10 unhappiest countries in the world. If you recall,
But there's no improvement?
there's no improvement at all. We've stayed in our little corner where we are still one of the most unhappiest. And it's easy to say that, but I think we need to unpack the indicators that they use or the measures that they use. It means, as an example, that largely in Botswana, if you ask people whether they can trust other people in the country, it means that we don't trust other people. It means that people generally don't have good health. It means that obviously there are also poverty levels in Botswana. We should get away from that we still have a good chunk of people that have gone into the middle class categories and upper middle class, but we still have people who are still living below the poverty line. So that's a problem in terms of freedoms and security and those type of things. So we really, I mean, one of the most really depressing things for me is education. I followed the recent results, or the Form 5 and the Form 3 results, where we throw tens of thousands of kids, 15-year-olds, failing Form 3, and they absolutely have no future. And we can all walk around Mogobe not doing anything about it. I've talked to colleagues, I've talked to educators, so we need an urgent education pizza. So the drop or the deteriorating performance in education is also an indicator of a society that's also deteriorating in terms of well-being. Because remember, this child, apart from the education, the quality of education, it is the parent who's maybe not doing their job. It is the teacher who's, remember, we are not happy, so we have a teacher that's not happy, and generally the public servants in Botswana are not a happy lot. So they will not perform. Remember, my motivation around this is that if you don't have this general happiness of society, it means we will not be able to perform as a society. In other words, we won't reach the economic performance rates that we want by 2036, like wanting to be now to jump into high status economy.
Yes.
So these social ills, I mean, an example that's depressing, I have to mention this, is the number of teenage pregnant. I mean, the other day they were saying in one school, secondary school, over 120 kids pregnant in one. All these, I mean, I can carry on and on and on and say there is really something that's not, and why are we not making this into a national discussion, a discourse that we as learned people need to stand up. And I have to say that, like I said before, and I'll talk more about it, from a general reading of social science or evolving of social societies over the past 300 years. It's actually not very surprising.
I'm going to interrupt you there because I want us to get to the barometer, the actual report, the happiness report. It should actually be called the unhappiness report.
Yeah.
But what are the key ingredients, and specifically where are we failing? I want you just to drill down in terms of what the findings are.
Let me use just basic examples of where we. I mean, I drove to Pakalani the other day, where you can say it's an affluent suburb of Botswana, and I actually, because I was visiting a friend, I couldn't find my way because there are all sorts of gates everywhere, in terms of trying to put security. So now Pakalani is gated communities because of security concerns and all that. And I'll talk more because I want to talk more about a very compelling and a grand study that has been done around inequality, what inequality does to society. So all these things that we are discussing are actually just symptoms, and we need to go back to what's actually causing this type of thing. So for me, these gated communities, The fact that now, generally in Gaborone, when everybody builds a house, you got to have high walls, you got to have security fence. What are we defending ourselves against? Yeah, we are defending ourselves against fellow citizens. So really, and this goes to one of the elements of the happiness report, which is trust. If I give an example, the happiest countries in the world, your Scandinavian countries.
Yes.
In Norway and Sweden, 66% of the population trust other people. In Brazil, it's 5%. Brazil has got one of the highest income inequalities in the world. Botswana is number 9 in the world in terms of Gini coefficient.
Brazil or behind Brazil?
Pardon?
Are we ahead of Brazil? Or
I think Brazil is worse than Botswana. And South Africa as well. It's one of the really classical examples of a society that's deteriorating like Botswana. And the answers now, researchers are identifying inequality as the heart of the problem. So Botswana's really bad inequality is causing a divide, a corrosive effect and divisive effect in society that makes people angry. You know, the studies have been done about how this economic and material and greed and individualism and the whole essence of you lawyers talk about capitalism, because I want to avoid this classification. I want to just talk about practical stuff. But in the end,
it's rugged individualism.
Absolutely, exactly. That is now anchored in our society. That's causing so much harm that we can able. I'll talk about how some societies, like the French society in France, France has been able over 300 years to be able to not just look at economic growth, but look at how they can manipulate the social evolving and dynamics to address what the problems is, what capitalism, the downsides of capitalism, and how can address.
But last week they had a disaster in the streets. I mean, there's the issue of adjusting the retirement age, which led to a spillover. I think I was watching CNN that it was really terrible, that these riots and so I'm just mentioning French in passing.
No, sure.
But you had earlier mentioned Norway, where they also do have challenges related to suicides, related to the fact that a third of the year they say that is dark, something like that. They've
got terrible weather.
Terrible weather.
It's interesting that the happiest countries in the world are sitting on one side of the world, which is quite
so
awful weather.
when we try and look at them as examples, it's clear to me that we have to go deeper. So I still want you to go back and identify what the report says are the specific things where we are lacking in, and what are the specific things where the likes of Norway and France, for instance, can improve upon. Is it purely the question of inequality or inequality?
Yeah, look, it's obviously the indicators are different. Like I said earlier, you got these 6 or 5 indicators that they use for the World Happiness Report, which is generosity is one of them. Just people being able to help, have kindness for your neighbors, for fellow citizens. So we are no longer a kind and generous society, according to this. Yeah, exactly. So if you ask me to say what are the underlying, the underlying thing is, I mean, just to put it bluntly, and these countries in Scandinavia are performing better. I mean, there were interventions. This gentleman, the Prime Minister of Sweden in 1932, he set up a vision for Sweden to say Sweden will be a classless society. In other words, his vision was to ensure that despite developing to be, currently classified as a developed country in Sweden and Norway, but they had interventions that ensured that this essence of Boto, classless society, generosity, obviously they've got a huge welfare state, but they can find it. It's massive. Yeah. But it's because
the tax
is very high.
Very high.
And you know what? Yeah, up to 60%. Yeah. And in Denmark, with this 60% tax, you can't believe 80% of the Danes support the 60% tax. Why? Because they know exactly where the tax is going. Free education, health in Denmark with its 6 million population. each member of the population can go onto an online platform and have all their health records, pick them up, know exactly how they're performing health-wise. So they see exactly where their money is going. Yes. So this is an example of when you ask me how can we actually intervene.
Teachers are apparently the highest paid.
The highest paid, because that's the heart of a nation in terms of the quality of education. The quality of education, it starts with the quality of the teachers, the quality of the infrastructure that you offer for that. So that's where the bottom.
So that was just the one barometer we started with, which is Boto, or being kindness.
And
what
trust.
are the others? Trust.
The other one is which I believe is really affected Botswana big time, is freedom. Freedom here is not freedom in terms of toying and political freedom. It's where individuals are able to live to their purpose in life. In other words, you have freedom. No. Freedom to say, I want to be a lawyer and a superintendent. Actually, the system or the society allows you to be who you are, your best self. Okay? So in Botswana, freedom
to self-actualize.
Absolutely. And also freedom not to feel a sense of oppression by the system, the modern day system. Say, for instance, security. My suspicion is that the emphasis on security for Botswana for the last 20 years has actually affected the quality of freedom of our people. The fact that people say, who's watching? I can't say this on my phone. The freedom of expression, freedom to that is one of the factors that lead to happiness. If the nation or society does not feel free,
if you believe you are being monitored,
absolutely. You are not free. You are not free. You are not free. So freedom is one of those aspects that are important ingredients to a happier society, where you can, obviously we're not saying freedom to do illegal things, but just freedom to be able to live your absolute potential without affecting the freedom of others. I think you can quote some of the...
And where does corruption feature in all of this, in terms of the barometer that leads to unhappiness?
It's related to trust, because it means when your trust levels in society start dropping, when both start dropping, it means that people will get up to mischief, because to try and find, and also it's related to inequality, because what happens with inequality is that when you have people at the bottom of the scale, and they walk around and they see the people on the top of the scale walking around with nice cars, nice fashion, people tend to be affected because status is a big thing. They say human beings want to preserve their social status. When it's threatened, then people go into mental, almost mental illness, into anxiety, and sometimes they can do whatever it takes. They say, I'm going to rob this person because it's richer, it's better, because if I can have this car, then I can drive around and my status will improve. So status and the modern day emphasis on material, on consumerism, all those affect how people view society.
So if you look at the happiness, which are now called the unhappiness report,
because it's always on the other side.
Over the last 4 years, are we stagnant? Are we improving slightly? Or are we getting worse?
I'm sorry. I don't want to be the deliverer of bad news, but I think. One of the solutions towards the end of the program, you're going to ask me what can we do, is that we actually, we don't even measure our own. A lot of people, when they see these reports, they say, now they haven't asked me, I'm happy.
Well, nobody has asked me,
exactly. I've never been asked.
We said this last time.
Yeah, exactly, that people wonder where this study is, because we rely on other people to do the studies for us. And the issue is we've got statistics in Botswana, we talk about social welfare systems. How do we know that we address the key aspects of social and psychosocial well-being if we don't measure, if we don't study, if we don't do the surveys ourselves so that we can start believing what it is? So we have to believe them because they are repetitive, they are done globally, they are done by full experts from top universities.
Don't they bring some of our own researchers? Do they not hire them?
No, they do. A lot of these things, I think they work with, it's like the World Economic Forum reports. They work with the BNPC. I'm not too sure with this one, they also work with BNPC. So they actually use the structures in obviously they have methodologies of how they ask, which is universal. If you are, and they look at both subjective, they call it subjective analysis where they ask questions about how happy you are. But there are also what they call objective ones, like life expectancy. Life expectancy is one of the key aspects of the happiness report. And believe it or not, life expectancy in Botswana, I was really shocked last year when I attended the Botswana Business Conference up north in Francistown, and this gentleman was presenting on the HDI report that Botswana's life expectancy is actually now dropped to 61. So this is a life expectancy in terms, it's part of the measures. Yeah. I mean, we are having, and the issue is these aspects of inequality, mental health, anxiety. There's been demonstration or studies that shows that it affects your physiological being. This is now going to your immune system, your cardiovascular systems, and so people actually having heart attacks, mental issues, drug issues, alcoholism are all emanating from this. Hence, even our life expectancy dropping the way it's dropping.
That's drastic.
It is. I mean, it's coming down to the levels of during the peak of HIV/AIDS, where it was in the late 50s, 58, 59, if I recall. It recovered
a bit.
Yeah, it recovered. It recovered after, Remohai's intervention and ARVs and all that. But now you can't just blame HIV/AIDS. Now it looks there's something insidious which is happening in society that we need to start.
You say there's need for us to send the clarion call and more or less stand on the rooftops and start shouting about this. So how do we do that?
Look, in the end, we all have to do the part we can. As a consultant, that is why I'm here. That is why I've written articles about it. That is why when we do our consulting assignments, I've actually done happiness presentations, because happiness can be at individual level, can be at family level, can be at community level, can be at country level. So there are different ways of intervention. So I'm not just showing you what I'm doing, so you need to do your part. But obviously we can do our parts. You've done your part. Yeah. Absolutely. So what I have done, which I thought would really, really help, was, like I told you last time, I did have a chat with Martin Silkman at the University of Pennsylvania, because they have devised a curricula that goes into junior and adolescent stage type students and infuse well-being education into certain schools. So they've piloted in Australia, they piloted in Bhutan. Now that whole project is taking off big time, because my belief is that if we don't build our kids to have grit, to have resilience, to know, Ghana people don't even know how to relate to other people these days. To have those in this, to say, how do you, in business, we talk about collaboration, open you, to be able to have a chat. Some people don't know how to do that because we don't get taught those things at school. So those things need to be infused into school curricula. So the results have been that the kids, importantly, they resist bullying. There's reduced mental health issues in schools. Use of drugs and so forth has also come down. But importantly, the performance of schools went up, something that we urgently need in this country. Mogobe, to have, there's past results from 5. I was shocked on social media when people were celebrating St. Joseph's at 37% pass.
That's horrible.
You were one of those who were celebrating St. Joseph's, and the average was 20-something. How do we say
that means 63% failure?
Yeah. We are throwing thousands and this is every year. Thousands and thousands of kids on the streets to do a very basic jobs.
Because it's not as if some of them will be absorbed into vocational schools or brigade.
No, absolutely. Like they won't. They fail, so they will struggle to go into vocational school. So it means that we basically have entry-level jobs of being cleaners or to be bandabadisa and become entry-level security guards. This is what we are throwing the majority of our population. When this country needs skills. This country needs skills. And, you are talking about Form 5. The tens and thousands of kids at Form. These are 15-year-olds. That are going helpless. And when I was at the farm the other day, I one of our farm workers has got a son who's 15 who just failed at Mabule Community Junior School, and it's depressing. I mean, I sat with him in the car and we drove around and just checking how he is, how I can help and all that, and you can see these kids are helpless. Helplessness leads to social ills, Mogobe.
Yeah.
This is why you start drinking. This is how they start having pregnancy and having kids at a young age. And we get surprised at those sort of things. So what I did with education is that I contacted the Ministry of Education and said, look...
I was going to ask you.
Yeah. So I contacted the Ministry of Education and said, look, we've got to do something here because we can't every year having reports of such really abysmal results from our schools. And we look like we are stuck or we are hamstrung. We don't know what to do. Obviously, we rely on you as the ministry, but I have an idea of what's working in other countries. So he says, good idea. Put together some of the team members and senior managers in the ministry. We did a presentation. I called in one of the experts in this education. Yeah, they are. So I called, because you were saying, what are you going to do about it? So we discussed, we presented the models of how education, especially at the early stages, can lead to a happier society. I mean, I said at the beginning, everybody strives for a happier society.
Yes.
And we are one of the worst in the world. So we got to go back to basics and one of them is how do we manipulate our curricula to build aspects that will have better citizens. Better citizens means innovative citizens, more generous citizens,
but
and all that.
What was the response? The initial response?
So maybe I'm avoiding it because it wasn't so good. Anyhow.
Were people not shocked?
No,
or they are well aware of the problem.
No, they are obviously well aware of the problem in terms of failure rates around Botswana.
But is it just business as usual?
Yeah. So we presented. I brought the experts. They were in the presentations, and they said this is a good idea, Mr. Kgengwenyane, and InnoLead is something that we can consider. But by the way, we have they have these guidance and counselors at the schools. We have those. I try to explain why that is inadequate, in terms of having ineffective, as shown by now that we're having really chaos in a lot of our senior schools. And they said it's a good idea, but do you have money to be able to? I said no. I'm bringing an idea that I'm hoping you will. No,
but
you'll
there's
bless.
Already a massive education budget. Can't they reallocate funds from the existing budget?
Yeah, that was 2 years actually around COVID time, so that did not take off. Basically, because I proposed to them, give us a few schools to pilot. Let's just go there. I've got a team of experts. They can come in. You pick a few schools, especially the ones that are really, really troubled by these social ills of drugs, of mental illness, all that type of thing, resulting in really bad performance. You go there, a couple of schools. We infuse this into the teachers. The first thing is to coach the teachers. These guys take the teachers for 1-2 weeks so that they infuse the curriculum. The teachers have to be happy first. So they start with infusing this. And you can imagine now you have happy teachers teaching kids how to be happy and curriculum that is actually biased to watch.
In 2 weeks is enough to change?
No. For the they have a retreat for the teachers to orient them on the program and give them tools to get them going. No, remember once they start, they are also supported through the program. There are tools that they use, like this school in Australia where they rolled off the same program.
So how did you resolve the money issue when they raised it?
Look, I mean, these are global experts. If they come here, they want to be paid. I mean, they want to participate, and they were also very concerned about Botswana State. I mean, the thing about Botswana is that in the eyes of foreigners, they all get shocked by these results because they think we're a really good country, economic performance. Exactly. So we got this bubbling time bomb that even now there are murmurings by expatriate society that this is not the Botswana that they knew. About, exactly. I mean, in terms of security, in terms of trust, in terms of the divide, in terms of violence. I mean, just here, I mean, was it phase 2 where those 8 robbers were shot, cold-blooded? I mean, one thing about inequality is that all the societies that are the divide between the rich, there is so much violence. I mean, these guys demonstrated that the more the violence, when the level of inequality is so deep in the society. So for me, it was people were celebrating, and I say this is a wrong indicator. Sometimes you look at the wrong things. Like for me, because I observe these things, when you are expanding your mental hospital big time, like the Lobatse mental, for me it's like you've got a problem. There's a problem. When you are building all these huge police stations, big budget, going into billions. For me, it's like there's a problem here. So there are things that we are doing. We don't realize that they are really. One of the worst performance in the world at developed country level in terms of social well-being is the United States. United States is one of the richest countries, but in terms of social well-being, there are a lot of countries that do better. And it's simply because they've also mismanaged this aspect of social well-being. That's what I'm saying. As a country, we can learn from all this.
They have a guns issue and a race issue.
One of the states. Some of the states they spend more money on prisons than education. That's how bad things are. And I'm trying to say in Botswana we can do better.
We shouldn't have.
So this intervention education, long short of it is that it did not work out.
I'm taking you back to the basis. There has to be. I'm not saying name and shame, but I'm saying there has to be some kind of logic for saying yes, the problem is critical. Yes, indeed, what Professor Seligman and Mr. Kgengwenyane is bringing is worthwhile. There has to be some explanation for why it cannot be adopted. Simply saying you shouldn't charge money, I don't understand. Or the money is too much.
I just came from a conference earlier on economic climate of Botswana, where the minister and everybody, all the business leaders in Botswana congregated at Grand Palm, talking about Botswana's bureaucracy, red tape. Mogobe, how long have we talked about red tape? How long have we talked about doing business, unlocking, and many ministers. Some of us have gone through different strategies, and the spirit of why I'm saying that is because we tend to. I don't know whether the ministry fear also the bureaucracy of saying, can we really engage in all it? This is the type of situation we're in, where people can't even do an innovation that can help society. In other words, I'm speaking on their behalf that they find it difficult to say, innovate or go find money, and then we will pilot this exercise. You came with the idea because they think, hey, now we have to write the terms of reference, go out to tender, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And for me, that is bureaucracy. In other countries, you come with a very innovative solution, and the idea is not pervasive in that society. You obviously do the relevant justifications, get the funding, and do it because it's for the interest of the country.
Because you can do a direct appointment.
Absolutely. So I think those are some of the struggles in terms of our bureaucracy around such systems, which is pervasive across our systems.
Assuming the bureaucracy doesn't change, assuming that the system, because since you were last here, they formed the Ministry of Entrepreneurship. You know that,
I know,
and you know that there's a talk of the reset, and there seems to be a recognition that the mindset has to change. But assuming it doesn't change, what options are there available to us as the public to work with what we have? Is there such a thing?
We need to create a system here. We're talking both private sector and public sector that is accommodative to new ideas by citizens. One of the things that really, really frustrates as well is that, which there's a direct link, is that if you look at the Global Innovation Index, they call it GII.
Yes.
Again, the same story. Botswana does not perform globally when it comes to innovation. In other words, we're not a creative society. We come up with the ideas, we don't implement them. We
don't
try.
Encourage our creatives.
No, absolutely.
They may be there, but they're not being given.
But creatives here, I'm not talking about also on the art side, also creativity in the business environment and stuff like that, where ideas can be generated, can be nurtured to flourish, to end up in a country that's similar to your Dubai's, your Singapore's, and your South Korea's. So it's a tough one in terms of how we can, unless there is political will. I think you're probably leading me there.
Yeah.
There's got to be political will. In other words, there's got to be people that say what, so that you can be able to change, nip the bureaucracy in the bud, empower your peers and your ministers and your bureaucrats to be able to say, we have an idea, can we implement it, try it, fail, try another one, and so forth. I mean, countries like Dubai, I mean, the fresh things that they do. I mean, they have a ministry of happiness because they long found that this is important. I have proposed that we need a ministry that looks at all the policy environments across the different disciplines in terms of ministries and sees how this is leading us to become a happier society. That's what all these other countries are doing in terms of, even Germany had a ministry of happiness. So there are different interventions that you can do. But I have to say the one that's dear to me, which, by the way, I haven't given up on the education story because my strategy now is to approach the development partners like UNDP, Wellbeing, to see whether it would be something of their interest because, World Bank is the one that is ranked that talks about how in terms of the Gini coefficient, how inequality is so bad in Botswana, and that inequality is causing all these problems. So maybe if some of us go to them and say, "Can you fund this?" or UNDP from a development because they have an interest in obviously building a more robust, holistic. They might be able to. So that's my next program to approach them to see whether they can fund. They've actually funded in other countries these types of programs. So that's my.
When we were prepping for this, I thought to myself, I have a radical idea which I'm going to put to Kgengwenyane. Not so radical. The idea is this: to take our permanent secretaries, our deputy permanent secretaries, and directors and ministries, and even as far as even councils, the senior officials, and subject them to an education program similar to maybe Stanford Seed program, similar to what they do in the Gordon School of Business in Pretoria. They have programs for these, and then or even what our good friend in Canada,
Dan Sullivan,
Dan Sullivan
coach
does,
program,
and subject all of them for 6 months to intense training, and then unleash them into the marketplace. What do you think? Would this radical idea work?
Well, first, just to put a little bit of water on your idea, is that it's not really radical because I've actually approached government on the same idea in terms of, because unless we change or we influence the quality of leadership of our public sector, it's not just for them to lead the public sector. It's the things that I talked about before, where they become receptive to ideas from the private sector and be able to infuse them into our development path, and also to be able to be broad-minded. I mean, I see some of our policy makers in terms of some of these subjects which are critical to the country. I mean, how do we have such a sad state of affair in terms of well-being? We have such a sad state of affair in terms of inequality that has corroded the country for 30 years. We've talked about inequality. I think in the past few years, it has actually dropped down a little bit, but in the end, it is still one of the worst in the world. Well, so how do we have it?
In the president's reset speech, he said 2 decades. He said the last 2 decades. He more or less says this thing started at the tail end of, or in the mid portion of Mogai's leadership to now. If you read that speech carefully, the reset speech, that's what it implies. Or maybe that's when it became more, because everybody recognizes the problem. So I want you to critique my idea and tell me whether it can work.
I'm getting there. But because what I'm saying is, because it also touches on your idea and it being receptive by the system. HE could have talked about where inequality comes from. But the issue is, do our system here, I'm talking about the processes and our people in the public and private sector, appreciate the stuff that I've been talking about, that we are a country that's deteriorating on a number of gears, holistically. And the thing is, and what I'm trying to say is, this is not new. When I Mogobe, this thing, when I talk about over 300 years ago, there has been a deterioration
over 30 years.
I'm talking about globally.
Oh yeah,
300. If you take, there's a young man called Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He was a French philosopher who born in Switzerland, and then he traveled and stayed in some villages in France before moving into France. When he moved into Paris. When he got to Paris, he found an advert to do a composition of some sort and produced a paper called The Discourse on Art and Science. And his article was based on his observations when he landed in Paris. He says he found the corrosive, divisive urbanization, greed, consumerism, that the modernization is bringing some ill to society. This was 300 years ago. Remo, this was 300 years ago. This young man now became one of the the biggest influencers of the French Revolution. Enele Voltaire, Baudelaire, all these philosophers over the time. So, but what I'm saying is, that was in the 18th century. In the 19th century, we got people like Friedrich Nietzsche, who talked about how society, since the death of the church, because Ghana church going started declining big time during industrialization, when science was becoming prime and people were becoming more confident. They think they didn't need God. So and they said we need an alternative because the capitalist system is corroding our values. So the values started dropping. Matthew Arnold, a British philosopher, same thing. But the biggest study was by Emile Durkheim, also a Frenchman, who in 1897 wrote a book called Suicide. He said basically capitalism is killing us. And we know this is very important. This is very important. What he found from his study was that suicide rates were most prevalent in the rich, the educated, the Protestants versus the Catholics. Who else was there? But importantly, it was, and this is what's happening here in Botswana in terms of the people that are getting richer, but you see more mental health problems, especially more drug issues. So what I'm trying to say is that this thing is not new. So we need people who can observe these things, study them.
Other societies have
gone through the same thing.
Have been able to
find
solutions.
That is why the Prime Minister of Sweden in 1932 said, we have to arrest this thing. So I'm saying, as a country, let's pause. We are achieving the GDP. We have creating this good middle class, but the corrosiveness and divisiveness of the system, what can we do to protect this awesome nation? And I said earlier, we've been there before in our egalitarian type society when we were still in the villages and all. So let's capture that. That's the good news for you. Let's capture that, because I'm very jealous. Because I can relate to my kids and the youngsters today. Because we didn't have cars, we didn't have television. They think it was what I said, we are playing in the streets. You know what So we are happy kids. Despite just dinner having motor and things like that, life was still good. So we can harness that. And I'm saying we should go back. Some people say,
you are saying that the solution is staring us right in the face.
Is there?
In the face, but we are refusing to address it.
Absolutely.
Which takes me back to my so-called radical idea, whether even if we try to learn these people to be executioners of ideas, to be implementers, that may not be sufficient.
Which people?
I mean, the people I mentioned, that we bring them in and train.
Oh, okay. Them. No, those people that can help. I mean, I'm very close to Gibbs, by the way, and I've tried. What I'm trying to give an example is that I actually tried to talk to a very senior government official with no name about this intervention. Tried to, because it's about leadership. If we get the right leadership in terms of directors, PSs, exactly what you said, if we get them right, the vibe and the innovation and that type of thing through a top business school, you come. I mean, to be honest, I was told, wait. First, we can't see you with such an idea, because that idea needs to be, we might, if there is a tender out, and we might seem to have favored anybody. I mean, how do you start? No, this happened last year. Exactly that idea that I thought. So,
yeah.
So last time it's not really. It's an excellent idea. It's an excellent idea that we need to do. I mean, another thing that to be fair to HE, that he suggested, I think 2018 at the business conference in Francistown.
We thought it's a senior citizen with no name.
No, but that's not HE.
Okay, but this is a different one.
That's a different one.
Yeah.
It's a different. A bit lower than.
Yeah. Okay. I've got you. Carry on.
So he said at the 2018 conference in Francistown, terribly exciting idea that the PSs. In other words, try and pick, change the contract formula where you can pick non-political people to come and head these ministries at minister level and also at PS level. In other words, you are passionate about education. You just want to go there and make a difference to these poor performing schools, and you are the right person. But maybe like us, we are not really political people, but we just want to help the country.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was 2018, terribly excited. You say, obviously, they had to look at legislation, whether it's possible, and I thought that was going to happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is what 5 years later, it hasn't happened. So these things need to be implemented. So that's our skills, leadership skills, changing contracts for leadership in public service, such that they can get this innovation and that type of thing.
All right, we've been looking at the macro, the bigger picture. I want us now to go to the micro, at the family level, what heads of families can do, what entrepreneurs can do at an individual level to try and address this deterioration. Any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I can do a whole presentation for what individuals can do on happiness, because it starts with the individual. In other words, we shared last time the formula. Remember the 40%, 10%, where the bulk of what you can do about happiness is up to you. There is a genetic part, and then there is part that's dictated by circumstances. And there's a part whether you are married, whether you are what, which are circumstances, and whether you are already rich or you're poor. But we said 40% is up to you. Your things like exercising, finding ways of enjoying nature. Those are things that people can work on. Reducing your time on Facebook and on making sure that before you sleep. Because if you're on Facebook and you go to bed and the phone is there, it disrupts sleep. You're going to be a miserable person waking up in the morning. That's a fact. That's the stuff that even the Facebook people have admitted in terms of the bad effects of social media. So the first thing at micro level is to take ownership of your happy. Because happy people, we talked about it last time. Happy people, they are good, they become leaders, they earn more money, they've got better health, they've got all these goody things. So it really starts at ground zero at Mogobe. So what we do as InnoLead is that we also have these presentations that we do to corporates on the science of happiness, such that individuals and corporates can take them on, and hopefully when the institutions or the organizations are happier, obviously the company will perform better, because it relates directly to bottom line. If you don't have staff who are happy, it harms you. So that's at corporate level, at individual level, that one can do. But the other interventions, obviously, I want to get there sooner. So some of these are going to take a long time. So when you say at macro level, we can work at individual level, but really you need to be like, we need to do things like what Maktoum is doing for Dubai, where they establish a minister of happiness. They have established a minister of the future who looks at how Dubai will look like in 50 years, and then you work backwards. Isn't that terribly exciting? And one thing that Dubai does very well, which again,
you identify the future and then you reverse.
Then you go backwards. Absolutely. In terms of technology, society, what type of society, and they want a happier society. That's why they said we need a minister of happiness, because we want a society that it just doesn't have fancy buildings, fancy that, but the people are actually distressed. We just have more drugs in the thing. So Dubai, what they do is every year they've got a public policy conference for the public sector leadership.
Yeah.
Martin Seligman has spoken there. The head of NASA has spoken there. Dr. Diamandis, one of the top future technology type, has presented there.
Yeah.
So what they do is they try to
keep
infuse.
engaging them.
Absolutely. Now, this is something that you and I can collaborate, because this is something, again, that I wanted to talk to this senior manager with no name to say, as InnoLead, we are very ready to contact all these people for Martin Seligman. Let's have a 2-day conference for the public leadership. And then infuse them. They know what's happening around happiness, not just from Kgengwenyane and Mogobe on and on about. But now they can hear from Martin Seligman the groundbreaking work that they've done to improve people's lives in terms of building improved happiness. They're in technology and all the other areas. In terms of also performing, what does a performing public service look like? Let's bring public sector experts globally to come and talk to us. So that also, I find that it could be a short-term intervention, but it's something that really educates the nation, educates the public service, and we hopefully will start having influences on that.
Let me talk about something that some may perceive as controversial, and you hinted on it when you gave an example of this scholar who 300 years ago wrote about this godlessness, lack of a religious belief, or this tendency gradually to sort of become I don't know whether we call it an atheistic society. I'm trying to find the right word for it. To what extent does godlessness, however you define it, play a role in society. In society and in happiness?
Very good point. Very good point. First of all, studies of happiness. One of the things that make people extremely happy is spirituality. We all define spirituality differently. You've got your spirituality, I've got mine. That's part of my rounded happiness formula. Some people found it in religion, in Jesus Christ or Allah or different, or Buddha Krishna, and all that. They find it different. And it has been, the studies have shown people who are more religious are happier because of the spiritual line. So let's get that one off, that that really helps people to become happier. But what has happened now for the past 200 years is that the religion in the classical sense, because as the material wealth improves, as science went on to disprove a lot of the stuff in the Bible, people started moving away from when we started looking at the rationale and the principles of what has transpired in the last 20 years.
Science has disproved the Bible, but they've given a different perspective.
Yeah, we can interpret it differently. But I mean, in terms of, let's give you an example of Galileo, where Galileo, what he said about the center of the universe being the Earth, and he and his colleagues, I think Copernicus, the guy, the Polish guy, they found that it's actually not the Earth, it's the sun. I mean, that was just a class. Copernicus, yes. And I mean, he was, he was, his house arrested, and because he was seen as blasphemous to say the sun is not the Earth. That's just a classical example of what moved science.
He basically said the center of the universe is not.
It's not the Earth. It's the sun. It's the sun. Exactly.
And he
and the religious community were very unhappy with that, and obviously Rome clamped on him.
They wanted him to recant.
So
they kept saying recant, or we kill you. They kept
you got it. So I'm just giving you an example of something that it depends. It doesn't matter what you and I think, but in the end, people started questioning some aspects of religion to say, actually, maybe we should believe more in science, because science is actually proving certain things. So that's where I was coming from. So, but in terms of, but what is clear is that for many centuries, religion has been a major dictate in terms of morals, behavior, character, and so forth. And then when after the Enlightenment period in the 18th and 17th century, then the churches and industrial revolution, where you can see it in Africa, a lot of people, because of the distresses of life, they want to find something bigger, to be promised the afterlife, to say life is better somewhere. Now there are people on earth who found life better now on earth, like the Scandinavian countries. They are happy now. The Scandinavian countries are one of the most irreligious people on earth.
Ironically,
the churches have gone empty. Some of them are changing them into museums, but they are the happiest. In other words,
are they really?
Religion is they are. I mean, that's proven stats that they are one of the most religious countries in the world. In other words, they don't rely on religion for happiness because the system helps them to live their lives fullest now. That is why you see, in my view, that is why in Africa, because of all the distresses of life, we need an answer from someone bigger. That's why we vulnerable to all these, modern day pastors and doing sometimes very funny things, that occupy our people.
Charlatans,
really. Absolutely. So we are vulnerable to that because our people are vulnerable because our people are unhappy. And note that point. When you are unhappy and you have anxieties and you are vulnerable to things that might not actually help you. And there are a lot of jokes in social media about how you go to China, people spend time in factories and R&Ds and all. Our people spend a lot of time praying in churches instead of helping with the development process. So in terms of, in short, there is a place for religion. A lot of people are happier. They find a lot of comfort in religion. There are different people now who find a lot of comfort in science, believe it or not. There are people that find a lot of comfort in nature, and all that. So people find spirituality in their own ways.
I understand. Now, let's look to our corporate spaces in terms of entrepreneurs and their workspaces. What are you as InnoLead doing? I take it that you guys are on the cutting edge, as it were, in terms of promoting happiness at that level now, at a corporate level. And what ideas can you share with the viewers on that?
Yeah, I think, first of all, to seed certain ideas in a society, I read a lot of philosophy. And a lot of these guys, the ideas became very prominent where after they were dead. They were dead. And sometimes when you seed an idea, it doesn't take off in a day. It doesn't take off, especially in an environment where there's lack of a depth in appreciating.
There's even subtle hostility.
But you can't be hostile. Let me give you what Google does. What Google does for that stuff. Obviously, is a different example because it's rich is what. But Google, their office structure is designed for happiness because it excites creativity, it excites innovation, it excites collaboration, all those goodies that promote performance at corporate level. What Google, if you go into YouTube, Google has, they invite speakers on different subjects to educate Google staff all the time. They call them Google Talks. Martin Seligman has been there. Daniel Gilbert of Harvard on happiness has been there. Peter Diamandis on technology has been there. Ray Kurzweil, who's a futurist in technology, has been there. So they get all these guys and interact. So what I'm saying is, we need, although we are doing it as InnoLead, we've presented to a couple of corporates on happiness at work and the interventions, and I've actually told some of them we can do this free of charge as a present, just to enlighten, to say there are ways of building innovation apart from just looking at technology, because those people, they need to be on a certain gear to be able to be innovative, and that gearing, we need this platform, which is the happiness dynamics and interventions that can happen to do that. So we give those free talks. Then after that, they can invoke corporate strategies to enhance. I mean, we have we even have a committee called the iGlow committee, which means that we got to keep our staff glowing at all times. And this team, which changes every year, their task and objective is to build glow in the business. Because guys, we only lived 80, 100 years. So you spend so much time at work. It better work. We don't want to just work and be, And
what would you say are the key programs in that iGlow thing? What sort of activities?
Oh, as an example, our office is closed at the moment because they're busy refurbishing the office and bringing elements of excitement and happiness. When you are at the office, you should feel like you are also at home because you spend so much time.
Bringing in more color?
More color, more playfulness. So when you look around, it's cheery. We hopefully will make more money in the coming years because we have a picture of our headquarters. And it will be just guys who refuse to go home. Because of the vision that we have in terms of how it will look like, just to make sure that it excites innovation, it excites people in terms of what they do. You don't feel like it's a drudgery, people feel like, that's why most heart attacks happen Monday morning globally. Because it's because people just go to work and they drag. And then it leads to all these immune system decline, cardiac. People collapse because of that.
So what is an average entrepreneur watching this? What can they do? What little things can they put into effect?
Yeah, I think from in terms of some of the ingredients of a happy person. One thing is you got to take charge of your happiness. I've said this before. In other words, you at individual level, you got to look at it, and even more so for an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur needs to have vitality. You need to have energy. You need to be excitable like a child, like a 9-year-old boy. You can't do that if you had bad sleep. You didn't sleep very well. You can't do that if you are overweight. You can't. So there are things that you need to do. You need to be able to exercise. You told me that you walk. You got to take walks. You got to go into nature. Nature really inspires me. This weekend I'm spending time at the farm, and I know when I come back on Sunday I'll be well refreshed because of what nature and animals can do. And that's for me. It might not work for somebody else. And I do a lot of gardening. Gardening really inspires me. So you have to look at what is your individual touches that you see certain things and you smile. I read a book and I smile because I love reading. Insights. They glow, they excite. So the first thing is just at an individual level. As an entrepreneur, as a worker, it works for everybody. Whether you are a pastor, you're what. People, when you wake up in the morning and you're going to deliver a sermon, you got to be on top of your element. So you got to have a good rest. You need to have things that are inspiring the Saturday before that gets your dopamine going. So those are the benefits is that, when you do that, chances are you're going to live longer. Our life expectancy might just start creeping.
61 is very
it might start going up because, these anxieties, they drop your immune system, and we have people dying at a younger age. Like right now, the level of suicides and people, adolescents, it's just, it's unacceptable, really.
All right, so we're saying all of this at the end of the day to say the situation in Botswana deserves urgent attention. It's almost like the house is on fire and we need to bring in the hose, right? If you had the keys to the State House, what would be the immediate things? I know you'll call Professor Seligman at some point, but what would be the immediate things that we need to do, like in a short space of time? I'm talking 3 to 6 months.
I think the first thing, which is dear to me and some of us who go to really most rural places in Botswana and see the level of poverty there, that's really, they say the problem with inequality is that it hits the rich and the poor similarly. When I go and see that, I get distressed. Cortisol, that's
the rich are not safe.
Absolutely, you're not safe. And also just seeing it's depressing. Indeed. So the first thing is to deal with our poverty levels. I tell people that the percentage of people living below the poverty line in Botswana, they are less than, in terms of percentage, actually less than 200,000. In 6 months, if we all the brainy people and the teams and all that, we can say, how do we bring 200,000 people out of poverty? Is it really that impossible? I know it might sound...
China did that for billions.
100 million middle class.
Yeah.
You know,
China did
it in a few years. Yeah. So it's possible. Countries have done it. I mean, Singapore has moved from a poor to a developed country in 50 years.
So we're talking about 200,000.
So poverty.
People.
So we really need to nail our poverty system.
So it can be eradicated.
No, it can be eradicated. I mean, countries have done it. There's nothing. I mean, really.
Because there's some time. The previous regime talked of eradication.
And
people said, no, not eradication, amelioration. Some people were saying.
I mean, some of the strategies that we do, like you got to empower our people with skills and education. I mean, education. You have a more educated society. You have people that are employable. I mean, I tell people, the money that we spend on really unproductive agricultural things like ISPAD, on schemes like Ipelegeng. If you take those billions that we spent and you take some of those 200,000 people and you actually do a rapid education. Those programs exist in terms of rapid skilling. They even exist now even more because of technology, AI, augmented reality. Those people can actually be educated faster than the current system of education. In other words, you don't need 7 years. And people like Peter Diamandis, they have an X Prize where they get people to compete for solving some world problems. So one of their problems was how do you take care of illiteracy in communities? So they are working on a project in Tanzania where they want to, in 18 months, they can take a kid who is totally illiterate to literacy in 18 months using a tablet. No intervention of a teacher and nothing, just a piece of technology. And that's going to create such opportunities for kids. These kids do not need...
we can try that here.
I mean, the literacy rate should not be there.
That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two?
Remember,
we have 6 months.
Number two is obviously, like a corporate. The first thing you need is to have the right people on the seats. We call it the right people on the right seats. Not just in the seats, but the right seats. You got it.
Getting them off the bus.
Absolutely.
Getting the right people on the bus.
You got it, So you can't deliver with the wrong team. So the first thing, if you said I had the keys to the State House, is to obviously, first of all, I really believe that we overplay politics in Botswana. I don't know why there's 5 years and become a politician. We do things that are actually detrimental to us. In other words, we can appoint someone to be a minister simply because of political expediency, not for national progress. So, I might not last because I'm going to put people that are driven by meritocracy. They are competent people. They are people that can help with the transformation progress to make sure that the right ministries have the right people and the right structures in terms of those educated. So we might even have a rapid leadership development program by Gibbs or Harvard. Exactly the one that you talk about. Within that 6 months. Yeah, because after 6 months, they're going to now start delivering. Okay? So that's the first thing, just to upskill and have the right people on the seats, because those are the ones that are not going to do miracles in the coming 5 years in terms of delivery of the things that we want to do. So that's the second one.
Okay, this is good, and this is just a pipe dream, I'm saying, is this just a pipe dream, or there's a way in which we can inject people like yourself and myself in the political system? This may seem like a nonsensical question, but I'm just wondering to myself whether there's a way in which we can have the ear of the leadership and communicate this. What seems to be obvious solutions in terms of low-hanging fruit. Because what you just mentioned is low-hanging fruit. Am I right?
No, it is. And I don't like to believe that we don't have funds to do those type of things, because we put some of our funds have been so wasted in the last 10, 20 years in programs that are totally unproductive. So it's a matter of shifting priorities. I mean, like we just said, you can easily spend on bigger prisons, on bigger police, because you are being reactive. it's not going to address. You're just going to keep having more because society is bubbling with these social ills. So you got to. That's not going to happen in 6 months. But I tell you, in 6 months we will have strategies to ensure how we start stopping the social ills that are killing our society, where hopefully, I know it sounds very utopia, we can have people that say, I don't need a screen wall. I don't need all these defenses. I can walk into Old Naledi or some of the law with trusting our people. We don't have to have this debate. So inequality, addressing it head on will be, and they're experts. We're not Mogobe. These guys who wrote this book about the impact of inequality in society, a very groundbreaking book in 2010 called Spirit Level, which people like David Cameron, and it went right across political divide. The Labour, the Liberal Democrats, everybody, even in the States, it took off because the States got a serious inequality issue. So why is that fire not here? You're with me? But you can say people like you and I that read and observant, we have to bring this system to our... But you talk about politics. We put too much stuff into politics. There are a lot of things that are being sorted out in these other countries without being a politician.
Are you aware of this? That I don't know whether it's Plato or Socrates who said that the punishment for good men not getting into politics is that they'll be led by idiots.
Oh, sure. I think it was Aristotle. Yeah,
Aristotle. One of them. Yeah, Aristotle.
Yeah, he's the one.
But I don't know how much
Plato talked about we need to be, kings need to be leaders and leaders need to be kings. Something like that. That was Plato like said that. Yeah. You need to be philosophers.
Philosopher kings. Okay, just to drive the point home, I hate gloom and doom. I hate negativity. But can you paint a picture of what's going to happen if there's no intervention that we're screaming for? So that sometimes people need to see where we are headed, the cliff we're about to get off. If we don't intervene.
I think it is started. To have private security guards driving around supported by SSG, wielding machine guns. For me, that's like society is really getting, we're getting to some cliff, because this is you and I tax money be spent to help G4 transport money around. There's a free service that they're getting because of these social ills that are happening. The fact that we have newspapers that read like horror stories. People chopping each other's heads. So for me, the nightmare has started, and if we don't do anything about, we can do. That's why you see, I have a problem, and I've told officials, I have a problem with our vision. Prosperity for all, because for me prosperity has got implications that we all need to have money. So what a prosperity for me is related to materialism. And I think we need to change those type of narrations.
You prefer which narration?
For me, I don't have a cliche or a word that we can use, but for me it should be holistic in terms of human development. Issues of well-being, how we can coin it is a different thing. But for me, we are already in Botswana with our upper middle class level, where the society that's in the upper middle class is suffering. Guys are making statements that economic material has failed on the social side. So we have material gain, but now we have social failure. And I think in Botswana, it's just on our face. So we have to, and one of the interventions to do that, as I said, is to first, there are ways of addressing inequality. Countries like Sweden, they have addressed inequality. Like I told you about the Prime Minister of Sweden in 1932. They did that. Countries like Japan, they are some of the most, highly developed, but a lot more equal. Crime is so low in Japan. So there are development models that in Japan, they still have that feel of Japan of the 14th century. They haven't lost. So we, especially, I'm not just to say Botswana, but Africans, we are quick to quickly jump into the CNNs, the generations that glorify, where everybody wants to have more money, more possessions, more material, and then when they don't have it, then they start deteriorating.
Yeah.
They start having what they call status anxiety and things that lead to all this chaos.
Whereas there's just one aspect of
it's just
holistic.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, I've heard you. I think it's time now to wrap it up. But before we do, what can we expect within the next 10, 15 years? Sort of leave us with a positive message. Let's assume that the message goes through. And let's also hope that it does. What would then be the projection for yourself and for Lead, say, the next 10, 15 years?
The picture, look, you, as they say, you first have to have a vision. A nation without a vision, it's got no direction. So I get excited about, first as strategists, being able to bring excitement to the vision of what we want to be. The vision of Botswana of being this high status. I have other elements that we need to bring to it. For instance, as an example, one time in an afternoon, and my wife was not there. I said, what can I do in gaps that excite? I like trees. Like I said, I like trees. I like gardening. By the way, one of the projects that we want to do is to do trees on the streets everywhere in Gaps project. It's a social project that we want to do because of my passion for trees. So I decided to go to Botanic Garden of Gaborone, of Botswana, because I don't know if there's any other botanic garden.
I'm not aware.
Yeah, I went there in the village, and in terms of ratings, I really think that perhaps is the worst botanic garden setup in the whole world. The car part, the Sankedi wall, you go in, there's just nothing that lifted my spirits in terms of, in 1995, I think we went to Zimbabwe with some friends of mine, and we visited some of the botanic gardens in Zimbabwe. You can just lie there and enjoy the ambience of the
even
botanic
in
garden.
The heart of the
enjoy the indigenous trees and all that. So my vision is that we need to build that picture of cities and towns and villages first that are much more beautiful. Because if you live in, one of the things that bring depression is people driving in streets that are concrete, that are not looking good, with no flowers, with no trees. Why are we doing this for ourselves? You have flower garden in your, and then you drive around the city and there's nothing like that. So for me, it's the beautiful. People get attracted to beauty. People come together, they don't know what to do because we don't have. I was telling people we've got these three chiefs here, or kings, some will argue. And which is really a great thing to see. But next to it, then we do a Potterkevin police station. So we need some beauty specialists. But for me, there are very salient, easy things that we can do to build. Finally, by the way, they uplifted the museum. The museum was one of my examples.
Oh man, it's beautiful.
Looking outside, I don't know about the inside.
So it helped to make a lot of noise about that.
Yeah. I went to the
museum.
The museums of Bulawayo, Mafikeng, they are great museums. And then you looked at ours, you're like...
Now there we need to give them kudos.
No, absolutely. So we can do some of these things, because these are things that without beauty and art and creatives, we become a boring, stale nation. And my message is that it's not all about possessions, material, shopping centers, looking beautiful, Facebook and all those things. There is a better life than that. I was so happy that one of the good examples of consumerism society is the Black Fridays at the end of the year. And what's Botswana are terribly excited. They queue whole like in the States. Guess what?
Who hates it.
Guess what happened in Norway? In Norway, it failed to take off. Yeah, totally. It failed.
They don't see the point.
Because they are not a society driven by
consumerists,
consumerists where you just want to make more and more and more and more. So there's an example where you can actually affect your society to go in a direction where social support, where family, where social fabric, where Boto can become the center of society, because life is just beyond just money and possessions.
Okay. Hopefully we'll get to that. We'll get to that. We'll achieve that. Do you have a question for me?
Yeah, the question is very related to that one. How do we work together to achieve that?
It's tough. It's tough. But I think we've started. You and I have started platforms by which we can meet privately with others to try and uplift ourselves. What we need to do is just to take it further. Judging by the popularity of these talks, these discussions, people are beginning to tune in. So I think we need to practice what we preach. We preach persistence, we preach grit, we preach perseverance. So maybe we need to practice that when it comes to communicating with our government and pushing these ideas through. We need to be persistent, even if it means knocking on someone's door every week. We should do that so that these ideas can be adopted, because for the sake of our country, we need to do something. So that's my advice. Absolutely. My advice is just bring me along and drag me along wherever you can. And I want to be part of these efforts.
I think it was Margaret Mead, who, the American lady, who said it can take only a few to change society, and is the only thing that has. In other words, we should not despair. You got to keep at it and try to influence the direction of a society, so that one day, when we are sitting in our garden chairs, swinging, when we are 95, we said we made a difference.
We made a difference. We impacted.
Thank you so much.
Now, look at that camera there and leave the viewer with one last final concluding message, along with your contact details.
Okay. I think the message that I can, the subject of happiness and well-being was introduced at Harvard University a couple of years ago. And believe it or not, a lot of students abandoned their other classes to go for the happiness class at Harvard. In other words, the class was oversubscribed. And for me, that was a message that people are really hungry for aspects or strategies that can make you a happier person. And it has been shown that when you are that you can indeed improve your happiness. You don't have to be depressive. You don't have to be an anxiety person. You can move your happiness from 2 to 5 to 10 through specific strategies. So I would say invest in those strategies for a better society. And as InnoLead, we can help you in terms of those specific strategies.
And we want to be a part of that.
And Mogobe wants to be part of that.
That effort. All right. Where do they reach you at InnoLead?
We are reachable, I think, in terms of email. We are InnoLead@InnoLead.com. So they can reach out on that email address. Otherwise, if you want to contact me specifically, I'm reachable on 7130-3682 if you want to discuss the specific subjects and how we can take them forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it. Cool.